conversation came to me because there's a lot of discussion about the need for women to lean in. There's also a lot of conversation about how companies need to lean in and support women to progress in companies. So I've been on both sides of that. But I think this is the third element. I think it's very important to have the discussion about the couples leaning in together and how to make it successful.
We've tried to have it all. Over the last 40 years, we've tried to have great careers, great families, and a great relationship between the two of us.
I tell people the most important decision you're going to make, people say this, it's not so much the university you're going to go to, but it's the partner you're going to pick for life. So you need to pick somebody who obviously has similar values to you. Maybe they grew up the same way, maybe they didn't. But that you can tell that they relish your success. And so I can tell you that during my entire career, I would come home and say, Bram, they just called me and they want me to move to Paris and they want to know in 24 hours. And he spent the next 24 hours telling me why I should say yes.
This morning at breakfast, I was having breakfast with a very successful woman executive, and I told her about this event tonight. And she said, well, the most important question to ask is whether or not you're really female friendly. I said, why do you put it that way? She said, well, about half the men that I work with in business are female friendly. I said, well, how would you know? And she said, well, you can begin to look at the relationship that you have with your mother, your sister, your bosses, your teammates, and where you have had successful interactions with people of the other sex. Ilene got training at MIT, where the ratio was heavily weighted men to women. I got training when I was growing up with an older sister and a mother who worked, and I had this successful experience at the Federal Trade Commission. So I think by the time she got into this relationship, which has lasted for 40 years, she knew that I was female friendly, and that I would be the kind of guy who would, when she came home and she said, they want me to do this, I would say, of course you can do that, because it's not for you to figure it out at the beginning of the job, it's for you to figure out when you're in the job.
I gained the idea that I could be a leader of a corporation, and that I had a great background for leadership. I could actually be a Fortune 500 CEO, and I was 28 years old, and I had this vision. And I started to run businesses. I had profit and loss responsibility. I was 32 years old, and I developed my skills, and I had a great mentor. And we talked about, Bram and I, how we jointly handle the responsibilities.
Having a supportive spouse is really one of the fundamentals to obviously having a really sound two-career couple. The other piece of it is you got to live in a city where there are equal opportunities for both of you. And we take that for granted. Look, we just landed in Chicago 40 years ago. We were only supposed to be here for 2 years, but we've been here for 40 years, and in part we've been here because we've been able to move from one job to another without changing our residence. There are very few cities in the United States where you can do that. We've also been able to find many opportunities for Ilene and many opportunities for me. And it shouldn't be your spouse who's creating those opportunities or evaluating those opportunities. That's what we have work bosses to do plenty. So location is really important. And along the way, I had a couple of opportunities to go to St. Louis once, and Detroit once, and to move Ilene and the family to those cities. And what was clear in talking to the executive recruiter is that there weren't equal opportunities for both of us. If I went to St. Louis, as he said, there'd be only 1 or 2 jobs in this town, which Ilene would qualify for. And therefore, we passed on that opportunity. And rather than move to Detroit, I commuted to Detroit simply because there wouldn't have been the same kind of opportunities for Ilene in Detroit as there was here in Chicago. So there's no question that the second element of this successful relationship is you gotta live in a town where there's plenty of opportunities for both of you.
I remember that when I was pregnant for the first time with Emily, I said to Bram, we need a live-in nanny, because Bram was a consultant, he was traveling a lot. In my company, I didn't want to have to run to go pick up my child at 5 p.m. So I said, so we need a living situation, we need an apartment where we actually have room for a live-in nanny, and there's a good flow. So we actually bought an apartment. I remember being 4 months pregnant, we needed to redo it, and it was going to take 4 months. I said, we have to get this done, and we have to move in September, 4 weeks before my daughter was due. And I think my mother came to help us unpack, because I was 8 months pregnant, she didn't want me to. But it was a plan, and so that was step one. Then step two became when we had 2 children in this apartment. It was only a 4-bedroom apartment. So there was the nanny, or 3 bedrooms. It was the nanny, it was Emily had a room, and then we had a room. And now we have another child. I said, let's split Emily's room in 2. So we hired an architect, and it was a big room, we split it down the middle. And it was a way to be inventive, so it's being creative.
This time period that when our kids are growing up and we're juggling all these balls, you know, we were happy as can be. I mean, it was, you know, we were totally fulfilled. Our work lives were expanding, our personal lives were expanding, and we found time on Saturday night to have time together. You know, so we felt, you know, personally very satisfied. Now, I gotta tell you, it's not for everybody. You know, one day my next door neighbor turned to me after I'd gone through this, you know, rather intense period in the 1990s where I was commuting to Detroit. And he said to me, he said, you know, I could never make the sacrifices that you did. And I said, what are you talking about? I didn't make any sacrifices. So you're not, you know, when you're, you know, euphoric or you're enjoying everything you're doing, as we were in the 90s, as the kids were growing up and as our careers were expanding. It was like, you know, feeding our own sense of self-worth.
I tell people that I invented the word multitasking, because you gotta use every moment to do 2 things. Bram, when he was commuting to Detroit, one Saturday he said, I need to have a meeting with the partner from Germany who's here. And I said, that's fine, but Emily has a birthday party, and we had a swimming pool, and you can meet with him, and you have to do it in the backyard. And he was multitasking. He was watching the girls, he was engaging in it. I needed another pair of hands, and he was meeting with a partner. So it all worked out. I have to say that my spouse was always my partner and enabled all of the success.